48-year-old black CEO, Vanessa Claiborne, walked into her own luxury hotel only to be told, "We're full, guests only." She didn't argue. She simply made a phone call and everything changed. She wasn't looking for anything extravagant. No grand welcome, no red carpet. She just needed a key, a warm bed, and a chance to reset before a crucial board meeting she hadn't planned to attend in person. But when Vanessa stepped into the Oakmark Grand Hotel in Des Moines, Iowa, things took a turn she didn't expect. Vanessa entered with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't demand attention. Her soft loafers made no sound. Her tailored slacks weren't flashy, and her dusty blue silk blouse was simple yet clean. A canvas duffel bag hung casually from her shoulder. No assistant, no entourage. She appeared just like any other guest, or perhaps someone trying to be one. Behind the front desk, a young receptionist was chewing on the end of her pen, tapping her acrylic nails against the keyboard. She offered the kind of smile reserved for people about to be turned away. Vanessa, ever polite, gave her name. Claiborne, Vanessa. The receptionist's fingers moved across the keyboard, then stopped. She blinked, lips tightening. "I don't see any reservation under that name." Vanessa's smile didn't waver. "That's okay, there's a suite always held open for me." The receptionist hesitated. "Ma'am, we're actually at full capacity tonight. You'd need a confirmed booking to stay here. Guests only." The air shifted. Vanessa glanced past the receptionist at the gold plaque on the wall. Oakmark Grand, a Claiborne property. "I'm a guest," Vanessa said softly. "And more than that, I own this hotel." The receptionist blinked again, stunned, as though Vanessa had just claimed to be the Queen of England. A skeptical smirk curled her lips. "You own Oakmark?" Vanessa nodded calmly. The receptionist leaned toward the desk phone. "I'm going to have to call the manager." "Go ahead." Across the lobby, a couple in golf polos exchanged glances, while a man near the fireplace tilted his head, sensing something was off. Vanessa felt it, the look of doubt that said, "Someone's lying," and they thought they knew who. Moments later, Neil Dorrance, the assistant manager, appeared with a clipboard and a crooked tie. He spotted Vanessa immediately and, trying to keep his cheer, asked, "Is there a problem with your reservation?" "She claims to own the hotel," the receptionist said, her voice rising a little too loudly. Neil hesitated. Vanessa's gaze remained steady. "I don't claim anything. My name is Vanessa Claiborne. You'll find it on every quarterly report and every executive memo. I'm here for one night, and you should have a suite reserved under the owner block." Neil adjusted his glasses. "Right, just give me one moment." He turned, muttering into his walkie-talkie. Vanessa didn't move. She stood still, calm, but the tension in the room was palpable. That's when security appeared. 2 guards, not aggressively, but enough to make a point. One near the elevators, another by the coffee bar. Vanessa's eyes didn't flicker. She didn't flinch, but inside a quiet fire began to rise. It wasn't just that they didn't recognize her, it was that they assumed she didn't belong. She could have shown her ID, presented emails, ownership papers, or photos from the ribbon cutting 6 years ago, but instead, she took out her phone and made a single call. She didn't need anything more. She knew this wasn't just about a room, it was about something much deeper, and the people around her were about to learn that the hard way. Vanessa didn't pace. She didn't sigh. She didn't glance at the time or pull out her phone to record like some would. She simply stood by a marble pillar, phone in hand, quietly waiting. The call lasted only 26 seconds. She didn't need to explain much, didn't raise her voice. She just gave her location, her name, and said, "I've been denied access to my own property. I need this resolved immediately." Back at the front desk, the receptionist kept typing, hoping for a different outcome. Neil returned with a folder, looking nervous. But when he saw Vanessa still standing there, he tried a different approach. "Miss Claiborne," he said, emphasizing her name this time, "I think there's been a mix-up." Vanessa cut him off gently. "You can verify all you want, but I'm not moving." Neil looked to the security guard, who remained unmoving. The staff froze in a quiet standoff, unsure whether to escalate or apologize. The tension hung in the air. 3 women by the window whispered behind their hands. A young man holding his laptop pretended not to listen. Everyone was waiting for what would happen next. And Vanessa? She just waited. The doorman wasn't greeting anyone anymore. That's when she noticed it. The receptionist, under the desk, checking her phone, scrolling, probably Googling her name, probably expecting to find nothing. It would have been funny if it weren't so familiar, because it always played out the same way. People thought they knew what power looked like, what leadership sounded like, what ownership wore, and someone like her, brown skin, textured hair pulled into a neat puff, no designer purse, no loud jewelry, didn't match the picture. So they questioned it. That's what stung. Not the denial, but the fact that it wasn't even surprising anymore. She remembered another hotel lobby years ago in Milwaukee. She was 28, just made VP, wearing heels that gave her blisters and a suit 2 sizes too big because it was all she could afford. Security had followed her the moment she walked in. The only thing that saved her was the CFO who came down to greet her in person. She hadn't forgotten that day. And now here she was, 20 years later, still proving who she was, in a building with her name on the paperwork. She sighed softly, her eyes scanning the room. No apology, no correction, just the ticking clock and people trying not to stare too hard. Then the elevator dinged. 2 men stepped out, one in a gray suit with a clipboard, the other in a company fleece. Neither looked like hotel staff. They moved with purpose. Vanessa recognized them immediately. Regional Vice President Brent Kessler, District Manager Carlos Reno. Now, it was their faces that showed a flicker of panic. Brent approached fast, nodding at Neil without even stopping. "Miss Claiborne, we are so sorry." Carlos followed, breathless. "We're taking care of this right now." Neil started to speak, but Brent cut him off with a look. The receptionist froze, her eyes wide. She suddenly realized who Vanessa was. Her face turned pale and she slowly took a step back. "Suite 12 o'clock has been cleared," Carlos said, checking his tablet. "The driver's being rerouted to take you anywhere you need in the morning. Your usual fruit tray and espresso order will be waiting." Vanessa gave the smallest smile. "Thank you." But she wasn't done watching. She wanted to see how everyone responded now that they knew who she was. Would their tone shift? Would their posture change? She wanted to witness how power worked when it finally entered the room. It's one thing to be disrespected when people don't know your name, but it's something else entirely when they do, and choose to do it anyway. Carlos pulled Neil aside, his voice low but sharp. Brent was already on the phone, speaking in clipped phrases about HR, protocol, and service misconduct. The tension that had once been aimed at Vanessa was now redirecting itself inward, ricocheting through the staff like a pinball of panic. Vanessa didn't gloat. She didn't fold her arms or raise her chin in victory. She simply walked back to the front desk, slow, quiet steps, and placed her phone on the counter. "I'll take the 12th floor suite," she said, her voice even. "Same setup, please send someone up to confirm it's clean." The receptionist opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. Vanessa didn't wait for her to try. She turned to Brent. "Have I been checked in?" "Just finished," Brent replied, flipping his clipboard. "You'll have 2 key cards and an incident report by the time you're in the elevator." "Good. And the rest?" He nodded. "We've issued a site-wide notification. Corporate audit team is on standby. All current staff will be required to go through recertification on guest protocol. Disciplinary actions will begin tonight." Vanessa glanced over at the receptionist, who was now nervously biting the inside of her cheek. Her acrylic nails tapped against the desk, but the rhythm had changed. No longer careless, now anxious. "You'll speak to her," Vanessa said plainly. Brent cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am, privately with HR present." Carlos looked ready to say more, but Vanessa raised one hand. "I'll speak to her too, not now, after I've rested." She took the key cards, nodded once, and walked toward the elevator. Heads turned. Some guests whispered. Others watched in silence, but no one spoke to her directly. The elevator doors opened. As they closed behind her, Vanessa could still see Neil standing stiff at the front desk, visibly sweating. On the 12th floor, her suite smelled faintly of lemon and eucalyptus. The fruit tray was there, espresso pods neatly stacked beside the machine. A handwritten card with her initials waited on the table, though it had clearly been rushed. She walked through the room slowly, almost as if she were inspecting it, not just for cleanliness, but for attitude, for intention, for proof that somewhere, someone still cared about the experience she once built with her bare hands. Because this hotel wasn't just a business, it was her story. She remembered being 33, pitching to a bank in Minnesota. She paused at the door, taking in the room one last time. The buzz of movement in the lobby felt different now. There was a new energy in the air, a tension hanging on the edge of something not yet fully formed. She had made her point, but the real work was just beginning. The elevator ride down had been quiet, but now, standing in the lobby, Vanessa could feel it. People were starting to see her, starting to realize who she was, not just by name, but by presence. And that presence wasn't something you could ignore. Her phone buzzed again, an update from her assistant. "Everything is in motion. Let me know if you want a media statement." Vanessa considered it. She could have made this public easily. One tweet and it would have gone viral. One interview and the headlines would practically write themselves. But that wasn't her goal tonight. She wasn't interested in headlines. This wasn't about rage or revenge. It was about respect. The kind that wasn't given freely but earned and far too often tied to assumptions, not reality. She sat on the edge of the bed in her suite, the warmth of the espresso cup still lingering in her hands. The city was alive outside, traffic humming, a distant train horn in the industrial zone, but inside, it was still. Heavy. A knock at the door. Room service. The young man brought in the espresso, a note of apology from the kitchen manager, and an offer for a complimentary massage therapist. Vanessa thanked him softly, then closed the door behind him. She sat back down, took a slow sip of the espresso, and gazed out the window at the faint lights flickering across the city. Something was shifting, not just in the hotel, but in her. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Vanessa Claiborne descended the elevator. This time not as a guest, but as the CEO. Her suit was crisp, deep charcoal, ivory blouse, heels clicking with each step. There was a quiet focus in her eyes that no one dared interrupt. The lobby, just beginning to stir with early checkouts and coffee runs, shifted when she appeared. Staff turned, conversations paused. Even the barista behind the corner kiosk stopped mid-pour. Brent and Carlos were already waiting near the fireplace, 3 folders in hand, 2 cups of untouched coffee. They looked like men who hadn't slept, and probably hadn't. Vanessa nodded slightly and headed straight for the small executive conference room, just past the concierge desk. Brent followed, and Carlos fell into step behind her. Inside the room, the staff members were already seated, stiff and uncomfortable. Neil, the assistant manager, Kayla, the receptionist, and a woman from HR, Marta from corporate, whose notepad was already open. Vanessa didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, arms folded, waiting in the thick silence. "Would someone like to explain what happened last night?" she asked quietly. Kayla immediately looked down, avoiding eye contact. Neil cleared his throat but couldn't find a word to say. Vanessa waited, and finally Kayla mumbled, "I just didn't think she was... I didn't expect..." "You didn't expect someone like me to own the building?" Vanessa finished for her, calm and controlled. Kayla nodded, barely. "Was I rude to you?" Vanessa asked. Kayla shook her head. "No, ma'am." "Did I raise my voice?" "No." "Did I threaten anyone?" "No." Kayla's voice was barely audible now. Vanessa took a slow breath and turned slightly toward Marta. "I don't need this to be a firing squad," she said, her voice firm but not harsh. "But I do need accountability." Marta nodded in understanding. Carlos spoke up. "We're prepared to issue a formal write-up and remove her from front desk rotation until recertification is complete. Neil will be placed on administrative review, pending further interviews." Vanessa nodded once and finally sat down. She turned back toward Kayla. "How long have you worked here?" 4 months, Kayla responded quietly. "And in that time, how often have you thought about who built this hotel, where it came from?" Kayla hesitated. "I guess I just assumed it was some corporation, A group of investors or something. Vanessa let the moment hang in the air. Do you know how many properties I've built across this country? She asked. Kayla shook her head. 17. From Baltimore to Phoenix. Every one of them designed with intention. Luxury made accessible, service made human. I built this brand because I was tired of being treated like a shadow. She let the weight of those words sink in before continuing. So tell me, why when I walk into my own lobby am I still invisible to the people working under my name? The question wasn't angry. It was tired, honest, heavy. Kayla looked like she wanted to melt into her chair. Neil stared straight ahead, face red. Carlos spoke again. We've already drafted a memo that will go out to every Claiborne property today. Mandatory staff-wide inclusivity training. A reset. No exceptions. Vanessa looked at him. Make sure it's not just another box to check. I don't want people memorizing scripts. I want them understanding what respect looks like when they think no one's watching. Brent finally spoke, his tone more sincere now. We'll make it real. Vanessa stood again. The meeting was over. As she walked out of the conference room, the lobby seemed to straighten itself. Staff scrambled, some nodding nervously, but she didn't acknowledge them. Not yet. She wasn't interested in performance. She was looking for change. But before she left the hotel, she paused at the door. Not a single word was exchanged. But in the silence, everything had shifted. The work wasn't over. It was only just beginning. There was still one more conversation Vanessa needed to have, and it had nothing to do with policy. She waited until the morning rush had thinned out, not for dramatic effect, but so no one could hide behind distractions. No ringing phones, no fake smiles, just stillness and truth. She spotted Kayla Mendez in the staff lounge, sitting alone at a narrow table behind the coffee bar. A half-eaten blueberry muffin sat in front of her, and her phone was face down. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Vanessa didn't send someone to call her. She walked in herself. Kayla sat up fast, nearly knocking over her drink. Relax, Vanessa said, pulling out the chair across from her. I just want to talk. Kayla swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Drop the ma'am, Vanessa replied gently. This isn't a hearing. Kayla nodded, eyes downcast. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the fridge and the low buzz of overhead lights filling the space between them. Then Vanessa spoke. Have you ever worked in a place where you felt small? Kayla blinked and looked up. Yeah, most of the time. Tell me. Kayla hesitated, but then shrugged. I worked at a diner out by I-80 for a year, wore a paper hat, got yelled at by cooks every shift. Some customers never tipped. Some called me kid even though I was 27. I felt invisible most days. Vanessa leaned back. So you know what it feels like to be ignored. Kayla nodded. Yeah. Then help me understand, Vanessa said, her tone never rising. How you looked me in the eye last night and decided I didn't belong here. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of guilt, of realization, of something finally settling into place. Kayla's voice was rough. I don't know. I didn't mean to. When you walked in, I thought you were maybe lost or waiting on someone else. You didn't look like... She stopped herself. Didn't look like what? Vanessa finished for her, calm. Kayla shook her head, like the kind of person who owns hotels. Vanessa didn't flinch. And what does that kind of person look like? Kayla didn't answer. That's the real problem, Vanessa said. People have a picture in their head, clean cut, probably male. Probably older, definitely not me. That picture doesn't just live in your head. It affects decisions. It shapes behavior. I'm sorry, Kayla said quietly. Really, I know that's not enough, but I am. Vanessa nodded slowly. It's a start, but I'm not here for an apology. I came here because I wanted you to see me, not just as your boss, not as a cautionary tale, as a person. Kayla looked confused. I was you once, Vanessa continued. I started as a receptionist. Got mistaken for a janitor more times than I can count. Had people call me sweetheart and honey like I wasn't the one keeping the place running. Every time I had to decide whether to fight or let it go. And when I finally got into the boardroom, I told myself I'd build places where people like you could grow. Kayla's eyes were wide. Now you really started as a receptionist? Vanessa smiled. In St. Paul. My first boss told me I talked too educated to be on phones and moved me to night audit. That was the beginning. Kayla almost laughed. That's unreal. It shouldn't be, Vanessa said. It should be normal. She stood up. I don't need you to be perfect, but I do need you to be aware. Every guest who walks through that door, old, young, dressed up or not, deserves dignity. Start there, and you'll never have to recover from moments like last night again. Kayla stood too. Thank you for talking to me. I mean that. Vanessa nodded once and left her standing there. But as she walked back through the lounge door, something in her felt lighter. The message had finally landed where it needed to. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the Oakmark Grand had returned, at least on the surface. Guests wheeled their bags across polished tile, coffee cups clinked gently at the bar. A small family asked about nearby zoos. The world moved on like it always does. But inside the management office, it was different. Brent stood by the window, watching the valet rotate cars in front of the main doors. Carlos typed quietly at his laptop, drafting the official internal memo. Marta, the HR lead, reviewed new onboarding modules with a stony focus. And in the center of it all, Vanessa read through a fresh stack of evaluations, personnel files flagged for review. She wasn't angry, she was exact. I'm not here to punish, she said aloud, scanning one report. I'm here to prevent repetition. Carlos looked up. We're adjusting our interview process for front desk hires, not just for skill, but also for empathy, pattern testing, bias evaluation. Good, Vanessa replied, tapping her pen once on the desk. And put me on the rotation starting next quarter. Brent raised an eyebrow. You want to be what? A secret guest? Not secret, she said. Just anonymous until I'm not. Carlos grinned slightly. That's going to make a lot of people nervous. Good, she said. Let them sit in it. The real version of this job doesn't come with warnings. She stood, slipping the papers into a folder. Have the new training go live by next Friday. Include story modules. I want staff reading actual experiences from guests, not fake scripts. I want real words, human ones. Brent nodded. Consider it done. Vanessa left the office, walking back into the lobby. She stopped near the reception desk, where a new agent had taken over. He smiled immediately, respectfully, like someone who understood she wasn't just another suit walking by. She returned the nod and then looked around. Everything seemed still on the outside, but she could feel it, small cracks forming in old habits. And that's how real change begins. Not with a press release, not with a public apology, with quiet corrections, repeated until they stick. She made her way to the elevator, headed back upstairs to grab her things. Her flight wasn't until late afternoon, so there was time. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, she stepped out, heels soft against the carpet. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh linens and lemon. The suite door stood ajar. Housekeeping must have just finished inside. Her bag was packed neatly, zipped. Her laptop rested on the desk, charger wrapped. Everything was in order except one thing. A note, folded, sitting on the nightstand. She opened it. Miss Claiborne, thank you for your grace. I'll be better. Kayla. It wasn't fancy, no envelope, just lined notepad paper and careful handwriting. But it meant more than a pre-written company apology ever could. Vanessa folded it once and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, a car was waiting. As she exited through the lobby, the same doorman from the night before opened the door with purpose. Safe travels, Miss Claiborne, he said warmly. We hope to see you again soon, she smiled. You will. As the car pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back. She didn't need to because she'd left something behind, something heavier than luggage. She'd left the weight of being misjudged, the quiet ache of having to explain her worth, and what replaced it was better understanding. Discomfort. Growth. For them. And maybe even for herself. But there was still one last thing she wanted to say. Not to the hotel, not to the staff. This message was meant for anyone who'd ever had to stand in a room and prove they belonged. The ride to the airport was quiet. No small talk from the driver, no music playing from the radio, just the soft whir of tires on pavement and the occasional blink of a turn signal. Vanessa sat in the back seat, one hand resting on her purse, the other holding the folded note from Kayla. She hadn't read it again, but it was there, like a reminder, like a small piece of proof that the previous night hadn't been for nothing. She stared out the window at the rows of brick buildings, the corner gas stations, the faded signs for mechanics and bakeries. This wasn't where she'd planned to be this week, and yet, maybe she'd been meant to be here all along, not for the board meeting, not for the business, but for the conversation. Because the truth is, this kind of thing didn't shock her anymore. She wasn't angry that it happened. She was tired that it kept happening. Tired of how often worth gets measured by assumptions. Tired of how fast people sort you into categories without asking a single question. Tired of being made to explain things she should never have to say aloud. Yes, this is mine. Yes, I built it. Yes, I deserve to be here. And yet, she wasn't bitter. That's the part people don't understand. Vanessa didn't carry bitterness. She carried memory. And memory could be powerful if you used it right. As the airport signs came into view, she thought about her younger self again. That girl, working night shifts in cheap flats and stiff uniforms. No makeup, no recognition, just drive. Just the belief that someday she'd build something no one could take from her. She had done that, but buildings weren't enough. Because even with 17 properties and a team of executives reporting to her, people still looked at her and saw something else, something less. So, what do you do when the world refuses to see you? You make sure you see yourself clearly, without apology, and then you walk in anyway. You hold your ground. You speak plainly. You don't beg for permission. You act like the door was always yours. Vanessa stepped out of the car, grabbed her bag, and nodded at the driver. No more words needed. Inside the terminal, people hurried around her with their coffee cups and roller bags. TA announcements echoed through the ceiling speakers. She moved quietly, almost invisible again in the rush of strangers. But in her chest, something settled. She had taken a moment of humiliation and turned it into a mirror for everyone in that hotel to finally see themselves. And mirrors don't lie. They show you who you really are. She hoped Kayla would grow from it. She hoped Neil would learn. She hoped Carlos and Brent would follow through on every promise made in that office. But if they didn't, she'd still be standing. She always had been, because dignity wasn't something anyone gave her. It was something she never gave up. And for anyone watching, anyone listening who'd ever been dismissed, doubted, or spoken to like they didn't matter, Vanessa had one final thing to say. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are and walk like it every single time. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them learn. Let them wonder how they missed it, and when they finally see you, make sure they never forget. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something deep in your chest, share it. Leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak to truth, power, and the people who refuse to be ignored.